Good morning, good morning, good morning. Good morning, good morning, good morning. This is your man Marcus, and we are here for session two of Rebuild Live. And this is a live webinar I'm doing every Friday this month at 7 a.m. Uh, in anticipation for the release of my first book, Rebuild, which I will talk about more in this webinar. But just wanted to get everything calibrated here before we got started. But I'm just so thankful that you decided to join me today. And real quick, as I'll get myself set up here. Um, Actually, I think I think we're just about ready to get started. I'm going to wait just a few seconds um, just to make sure everything is copacetic on my end. But let's see. I think we're good to go here as soon as this pulls up. All right. I pray that everybody is doing well this morning. I'm so thankful that you decided to join me. Um, it is it is an honor. It is it is definitely an honor that you have joined me for this webinar this morning. I'm so thankful just to have the opportunity to present my passion to you. The work that I'm doing now, it is simply a um, it is sim it is simply a reflection of my passion, and um, if it wasn't for the passion that I have developed because of everything that I've been through, um, then there would be no reason for me to do any of this. So, uh, so again, I'm thankful, and I believe I have talked uh, enough, and we can go ahead and get started. So again, welcome to Rebuild Live. Once again, thankful that you have joined me. Again, this is a live webinar that I'm doing every Friday morning this month at 7 a.m. Ahead of my first book, which is to be released this month at the very end of this month, the 31st of March at on the Amazon marketplace. And so I just wanted to present some information to the world in anticipation of that book, which I'm very excited about and thankful to have done. So let's just go ahead and get started. Okay, so who am I? Again, my name is Marcus Kyler. For those of you who do not know me, I have been in ministry since 2001, and I received my calling while I was in undergrad at Morehouse College in Georgia Tech. I got a dual degree in general science from Morehouse and electrical engineering from Georgia Tech. I took the road a little less traveled after that, and instead of going straight into an engineering career, um, God would have it that I would go in straight into seminary. So that is what I did. I got my Master's of Divinity from Ashland Theological Seminary at the Detroit Extension campus. And after a few years off, I continued my education at Ecumenical Theological Seminary in Detroit, and just at the end of last year, I successfully defended my Doctor of Ministry dissertation. So that's my educational background. I pastored 5 years in the African Methodist Episcopal Church between two churches. So just a bit of a timeline about my my ministerial career. Just from 2007 on, I was ordained a deacon at the age of 25 in 2007. I became a pastor while I was still a deacon in 2008, just a few months after I married my wife. And I was at 26 at the time. I became a pastor in Windsor, Ontario, Canada. The next year, I was ordained an elder in the African Methodist Episcopal Church at the age of 27. 2 years following that, I became the youngest presiding elder in the AME Church at the age of 29. That assignment lasted 1 year, and then I was transferred to a church in Flint, Michigan, and I was there for 1 year. And being at this church is where I suffered the burnout, and then subsequently left pastoral ministry after that. I was blessed to have still been able to complete my Doctor of Ministry, and really my project took a turn after I suffered the burnout, and it really gave me a context for what I was already doing. It just took it to a deeper level. And so my purpose and my determination and the Spirit of God to help me to stay in this program was really instrumental in allowing me to go ahead and still get my Doctor of Ministry even after burning out in pastoral ministry. At the end of 2014, I successfully defended my doctoral dissertation entitled Building Community Through Social Media to Tackle Pastoral Burnout. And you can see a link on the screen. That is a link to my abstract for my research. And then also I was blessed to be on a podcast for an interview which centered around that research. And you see that link there. And then now here we are in 2015, and I am publishing my first book, which again is called Rebuild. Just a little bit about the book. The full title of the book is Rebuild, a 12-part framework for rejuvenating and restoring the burnt out pastor. And it's focusing on recovering from burnout and pastoral ministry and moving forward with life, and with life more abundantly. What I believe that this book is offering different to the marketplace is answering both the why and the what now of pastoral burnout. The why and the what now of pastoral burnout. And what I mean by that is that I've seen quite a few books and quite a few research materials that talk about why pastors burn out, and the different the different statistics that go along with that. But what I have not seen is what happens after a pastor burns out. What happens after a leader loses heart and falls away from ministry? How does that leader get back either into ministry or just a place where they feel comfortable moving ahead with their lives and moving ahead with their lives in a way that is productive? That is a question that I am answering in this book. And it's something that I've quite frankly experienced myself, because that's really my life is, what does recovery from pastoral burnout mean to me, one who has suffered burnout and has had to reinvent myself and to figure out where God is taking me. And I'm writing this book from the standpoint of not a guru, or not necessarily an expert, but one who is walking that path with you. And as I'm walking the path, I might be just a few steps ahead of someone who has burned out in ministry, but God has given me a framework in the midst of what I have gone through. And that framework that God has given me is something that I'm living out every day. And that's what qualifies me to to go ahead with my research and to go ahead with this book. And I thank God for qualifying me. Rebuild Live is based off of the 4 units, the 4 content units that you'll find in the book Rebuild, and the 4 lessons that we're going to be doing this month are based off of those units. So in the book, we are first of all rebuilding the psyche, and we talked about that last week, coming to grips with what's happening in your life as one who is burning out or has already burnt out in pastoral ministry. Secondly, we are rebuilding the foundation. We are rebuilding your foundation and remembering the essence of who you are, and really getting down to really the basics of who you are outside of your title and outside of just the position that you have or had as a pastor. And thirdly, we are rebuilding your faith. We're rebuilding your faith, rekindling your love for or faith in Christ. And then finally, we are rebuilding your life as a whole. We are rebuilding that. And that is simply resuming a productive, God-glorifying life inside or outside of ministry. And so just a recap of what we did last week, that last week was our first lesson, and we talked about rebuilding the psyche and looking specifically at the issue of timing. The timing is the very first aspect of the very first step in the rebuilding process from burnout and pastoral ministry. And we looked at Joshua chapter 7, verses 1 through 15. And Joshua, long story short, Joshua got in trouble, but he knew, first of all, that he needed God. And secondly, he knew when to call on God. And his timing helped him as he led Israel into the promised land and led Israel through various conquests that they needed to fight and to overcome in order to possess the land that had been given to him. And so his timing was able to help Israel avert danger. The relevancy of that is that as burnt out pastors, our spirits are no longer as strong as they once were. And when our spirits are not strong, we tend to trend toward reliance on ourselves rather than reliance on God. And all that does is make our situation worse. And so the first step in the rebuilding process is to consider timing. It might not be time for you to resign from pastoral ministry. Maybe it is, but that's something that you can only figure out by talking to God and getting some help, because you cannot do it by yourself. And the replay from the first webinar where we had the teaching on this lesson can be found at rebuildthebook.com/live1, LIVE, and the number 1. And you see that on the screen here. And you can go back and replay that and listen to that teaching in its entirety. So moving into the second lesson for this month, we are talking about this morning, rebuilding your foundation. Rebuild your foundation. And we want to look specifically, talking about specifically a lesson on balance. A lesson on balance. And we are examining Matthew chapter 23, verses 1 through 12. And I'm going to read that very quickly and very briefly for your hearing. And again, as I explained a few minutes ago, when we're talking about foundation, we're looking at who you are beyond your title and your position. So Matthew 23, beginning at verse 1, then Jesus said to the crowds and to his disciples, the scribes and the Pharisees sit on Moses' seat. Therefore, do whatever they teach you and follow it. But do not do as they do, for they do not practice what they teach. They tie up heavy burdens, hard to bear, and lay them on the shoulders of others. But they themselves are unwilling to lift a finger to move them. They do all their deeds to be seen by others, for they make their phylacteries broad and their fringes long. They love to have the place of honor at banquets and the best seats in the synagogues And verse 7, and to be greeted with respect in the marketplaces, and to have people call them rabbi. But you are not to be called rabbi, for you have one teacher, and you are all students. And call no one your father on earth, for you have one Father, the one in heaven. Verse 10, nor are you to be called instructors, for you have one instructor, the Messiah. The greatest among you will be your servant. All who exalt themselves will be humbled, and all who humble themselves will be exalted. So just to summarize these 12 verses that have been read for your hearing, we know that Jesus, who was the one who was speaking these words, we know that Jesus is God in the flesh, fully God, fully man, 100% God, 100% man. But and technically, he is the Son of God in creation. So God in the flesh and Son of God, literally in creation. Son of God, but still God, all by himself. And he invoked the name of God and claimed the authority under God's name in preaching, teaching, and performing miracles. And the Pharisees didn't like that he claimed that kind of authority. That there was a bold claim at that time, and the Pharisees didn't like that at all. And also, the Pharisees did not like the fact that Jesus challenged their priorities as far as what they thought was important. And that's one thing that we see here in Matthew 23. The Pharisees, the Sadducees, and the scribes had been challenging Jesus all that day in attempting to discredit him, because they felt that if they could discredit him, then they could, at that moment, if they could discredit him, then they could discredit his entire ministry. And they were unsuccessful in doing so. And so Jesus goes in, he really goes in on them. He criticizes them and he lets them know basically that they're majoring in the minors and minoring in the majors. So basically, they're emphasizing things that in the grand scheme of things aren't that important. And Jesus essentially is telling them that their high spirituality, as far as their rigid adherence to the law of Moses, really was of no use, because they weren't better people for it. They didn't have love in their hearts, and therefore they cannot draw people to the kingdom. And so the main idea in this scripture is that the Pharisees' righteousness for righteousness' sake was causing them to miss the essence of holy living. And the essence of holy living was to be able to reflect God, reflect the Creator. And he was, and the Pharisees, the Sadducees, and the scribes, they were unable to reflect their Creator because they did not have the love of God in their hearts. And the essence of God is love. God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth on him shall not perish but have everlasting life. The essence of God is love, but these Pharisees and these high-minded people had no love to speak of whatsoever. They emphasized titles, positions, backgrounds, and all of those different kinds of things. But Jesus emphasizes love, because it is love that builds the kingdom, and not superiority. Superiority only seeks to cause division and seeks to cause people to look at their inadequacies and look at how they don't measure up. Jesus never caused people to look at their inadequacies. He always looked to affirm the best that was in people. And these Pharisees could not do that because they did not have the Spirit of God in them. And so the application for what we're talking about here concerning pastoral burnout is this. Burnout in and resignation from pastoral ministry can potentially lead to an identity crisis and then to depression. And this happens, this identity crisis and this depression happens because you feel as if, one, you've let God down because you were called to the pastorate, and then you burned out and you ended up leaving the pastor. So you feel like you let God down, one. And two, maybe you've been doing it so long, or you've put so much of your heart and put so much of yourself and maybe even your resources, your money into it, that you feel that you don't even know who you are anymore. You don't know your identity outside of pastoral ministry. So it can lead to identity crisis and then to depression. During the burnout season, rediscovering hobbies and properly balancing recreation with obligation helps you to connect with who you are beyond your position. Now, how did I go straight from the Jesus denouncing the scribes and the Sadducees and the scribes, and you know, talking about how they were so high-minded? How am I going from there, and then I'm pulling, rediscovering hobbies and balancing recreation into this thing? The reason that I'm doing that, as far as this application, is because basically Jesus was telling them they were so focused on their position that they didn't even know how to live. They didn't even know who they were outside of their position. The Pharisees didn't know who they were outside of just rigid adherence to the law of Moses. And so when we burn out from pastoral ministry, similarly, a lot of us, we forget who we were outside of ministry. And so it takes us having to rediscover what our hobbies are and the things that we like to do, so that we can properly balance those things and properly balance recreation and ministry. And as we put our lives back together again, as we affirm who we are or who we were before we went into ministry, that can really help us to regain a spark for life. So what do you like to do that has nothing to do with ministry? Do that as often as possible to stay sane and to stay balanced. Now, what we see in what we have in the book Rebuild is that we're speaking directly to pastors who have experienced burnout in ministry and have are either on the verge of or have left pastoral ministry. But we also want to look at those pastors who have not left ministry, and maybe they're not necessarily at risk at the moment of leaving, but it's still something that pastors who are in healthy churches or are in a healthy state, something that they can look at and say, you know what, this is good to see, so that these are things that I can safeguard in my ministry in the future. And then there's also good for aspiring ministers or ministers in training to be able to read this as well, and to see the pitfalls of ministry, to be able to prepare themselves so that they can have longevity with their ministerial careers. So, you know, we're speaking directly to one group, but we're looking to also affect other groups as well. And so with this particular application, we're talking about rediscovering hobbies and introducing balance into our lives. Is good for the recovering pastor who has experienced burnout to do this, because he or she can regain a spark for life in rediscovering their hobbies, and that spark can really encourage them into a different place where they're able to recover from the burnout. For the pastor who still remains, or one who may be on the verge of burnout, or one who may not be, inserting hobbies into their lives might help them to really take some pressure off as far as what they're doing on a daily basis, and that can really help them in doing what they're doing. So that is the application of the lesson that we're talking about. And my heart for you, my heart, and I said this last week, and I'm going to say it again, my heart is for every pastor to remain in his or her position, if at all possible. My heart for every pastor is that he or she remains in ministry, if at all possible. But if not, if you don't feel like you can stay, or if you've already left, I know that God has given me the tools to help you, just as God is helping me, just as God has helped me and is still helping me even now, because the rebuilding process is an ongoing one. So just in these next few minutes, just a little bit about Rebuild. We're looking at 12 chapters, or 12 focal areas, or 12 steps for the pastor in the rebuilding process. And we are rebuilding from burnout and from despair and despondency, and we are rebuilding to a place of usefulness and vitality in the kingdom, whether you go back into full-time ministry or not. Because my premise in this book is that there is life after pastoral burnout. The layout of the book in each of the 12 chapters is going to start out with a biblical reference, and then we're going to move into theological reflection based on that reference, and then practical application just based off of my observations of life and my experiences in ministry. And then we're going to end the chapter with devotional points. We're going to be looking at points to reflect on, resources to read, and things to pray about. This pray for your pastor section, this is really for lay people who might be reading this book, and this might be something that you can share with your pastor to help him or her avoid burnout, because you as lay people have a very important role to play in helping your pastor to have a healthy ministry. And then my prayer for you, that is my prayer specifically for the pastor who has experienced burnout and is reading this book. So that is pretty much the book in a nutshell. And it will be available on the Amazon Marketplace March 31st, 2015, the very last day of this month. And what I'm asking you to do is to visit rebuildthebook.com. Again, rebuildthebook.com, and sign up for the mailing list so that you can learn more information about the launch, and possibly helping me out with that. That would be that would help me a great deal. If you say, you know what, Marcus, I see what you're doing, and I'm supporting you, and yeah, count me in, put me on the launch team. And so I'm looking for that kind of feedback if you feel it is warranted. So so again, we're trying to get people on the mailing list so you can learn more information about the launch, and you can also learn more information about pre-ordering the book and when the pre-ordering becomes available. I've been putting this thing together step by step. So every week, every few days, I've been adding something else. So by the time, if you would feel so inclined to join me again next week for Rebuild Live Part 3, then by that time, the pre-ordering information will be available so that you can order the book as early as you can. It'll be a couple of weeks in advance that you can order it, and then when launch day comes, you will be able to get that directly within not too long a time. So again, visit rebuildthebook.com just to sign up for the mailing list, to learn more about the launch, more about pre-ordering information, and just a few messages every now and then of encouragement from me. I would really appreciate if you did that. But if you would like to make it even easier, we also have now made available text messaging. So to make it even easier for you, you can text rebuild. You can text the word rebuild to 38470. Again, if you text the word rebuild to 38470, then that will also get you on the mailing list. And that call to action might be something that will be easier for you. Maybe you're looking at this webinar on your phone right now, or maybe you're sitting in front of the computer. If you're looking at it on your phone, then you might press pause. We're right at the end of our time this morning, but right after you do this, you can text rebuild to 38470, and it'll give you a couple prompts, and then you'll be good to go. Or if you're watching it on the computer or on your tablet device, then you can just pick up your phone, and as I'm still talking, you can be texting in right now, rebuild to 38470, and that'll get you squared away. And so making this text messaging easier to get signed up for the mailing list, I'm praying that that'll help us to move forward with some signups and help us to move in the direction of really getting this team together and really getting things together. So again, thank you so very much. Text rebuild to 38470, and I look forward to talking to you next week. God bless you.